I'm speaking with Ithaca College student Lea Sevola, who is performing in the play Arcadia by Tom Stoppard. The playwright's masterpiece starts tomorrow evening at the Herner Theater at Dillingham Center on the IC campus. And Lea, thanks for talking with me today.
Happy to. Good to talk to you.
So why don't we just start off maybe by asking you to talk a little bit about the play, just a kind of an outline of the plot.
Okay, so the play takes place in two different time periods. There are characters who are living in the early 1800s, and there are characters living in the 1990s. So you have two storylines kind of going on at the same time, and then they eventually converge, and the 1990s people are kind of studying the lives of the 1800s people. So in the 1800s, Thomasina Coverley is growing up, and she is the lady of the house, the Croom estate in Sidley Park. And she is you're looking at daily lessons with her and her tutor Septimus, and she's very bright for her age and is coming upon these huge mathematical discoveries, and she's only 13. And then in the 1990s, a character named Hannah, who is visiting the same estate of the Coverleys, the Croom estate, and is studying the garden of the estate, but actually stumbles upon some of Thomasina's journals from the 1800s and starts to unravel her story and how Septimus is involved with that. And then was Lord Byron, the poet, who we all know as an actual person, was he around at the estate in the 1800s? So it's a play about knowledge and about uncovering knowledge and sharing knowledge. Yeah.
And could you talk a little bit about your role?
I play Chloe Coverley, and she is a character in the 1990s. She is a descendant of the Coverley family from the 1800s. So Thomasina has a brother named Augustus, and Augustus's family line is the line that Chloe comes from. So she has two brothers who also are Coverleys in the 1990s, who are also in the play. And she is not a scientist like her older brother Valentine or Hannah or Bernard, who comes in and he's like a historian, and there's a lot of intellectuals around her, but she is an 18-year-old who's very preoccupied with love in spite of all science and logic and history.
And so what does she think of her ancestor Thomasina?
She's very interested by her, but she understands that all of the theories that she's coming up with and all of the theories that have come from her time period are sort of ruined by love, that like the deterministic universe that Thomasina is talking about, or the trajectory of the universe can't be predicted because people loving each other kind of messes with things and is unpredictable.
Why do you think Tom Stoppard toys with the themes of math and science and feelings and romance?
It's very interesting because math and science exists to explain the universe, and I think that love, for Chloe at least, is unexplainable and kind of denies that. So the reconciliation between the explainable and the unexplainable, the passionate and the practical.
Let's talk a little about Thomasina. What do you think about the fact that she's a child prodigy, a female child prodigy who's studying math in the 19th century?
I don't want to give anything away, but her contributions to the scientific community were never communicated in her time, so no one actually knew that she was stumbling upon and discovering what she was discovering until the 1990s, when it was being uncovered in her family home. So on a global scale, she's kind of an unknown, but for these people and for me as a person studying this play, it's incredible that she's only 13, and the things that she says during the show are incredibly insightful, and that's very clear in the play and in the direction of the play, that she is beyond her age in terms of her knowledge.
Why do you think Tom Stoppard chose a female heroine as his main character?
I think that I mean, it's great that he did that. I think especially in the 90s when he wrote it, and today there's a big emphasis on women entering science and women being scientists and mathematicians. My sister is going to be like a biochem major, and when she was looking at schools, they were very adamant about women in science and women in math and STEM like subjects. So I think that sort of influence on the time period when he was writing the play definitely came into it, and I think that that adds another layer of her being ahead of her time, because all of the people that she's talking about in terms of scientific discoveries are men. She talks about Newton and stuff like that, and he, obviously was a guy and came up, and and there's Newton and there's Einstein and all of these male scientists and male philosophers and things, and she's a female and she's 13.
And how is she treated by her tutor?
He has a lot of respect for her. He is, Septimus is very fascinated by her, and the relationship kind of shifts that he's teaching her, but he kind of realizes by the end of the play that he has a lot to learn from her. And so there's a lot of respect for Thomasina and her knowledge in this play.
And I noticed in an article on the IC Theater website that this play is called Tom Stoppard's Masterpiece. And why do you think that is?
It is incredibly intricate. We, as a cast and crew, every day can have a discussion about a little detail that comes up that is woven in some sort of way that like brings everything together and comes full circle. And there's all these just little nuggets that you're like, oh, how did he do that? He totally tied those things in. And it's hard to explain them. I mean, it takes a lot of deep study of the play to see them, which is cool for the cast and crew, but it obviously doesn't always come through in the production of the play, because you'd have to see it like a million times to be like, oh, I noticed that between time periods and stuff. But it's all so specific and deliberate, the references he's making and the discovery. Like one example is Thomasina says, she's talking about how if you could stop all the atoms and look at their direction and position, you could write a formula for the future. And then later, Chloe's character asks her older brother, so you can program the future, right? Because of determinism, and kind of takes that theory a step further to say, oh, but no, love gets in the way. So he kind of, across centuries, has this sharing of knowledge between the Coverley family in the 1800s and the 1990s, which is pretty interesting. And that there's a lot of things like that where like themes are coming up again and again between other characters and other time periods. So I think that is definitely part of the masterpiece of that.
Can you talk a little bit about the process whereby the cast and the crew work with the director to interpret the play?
We started out with 4 days of table work before the proper rehearsal period even started, where we had a deep discussion of the play and reading through it and assessing every single reference in the play, mathematical, historical. And we actually had a lot of experts come in and talk to us, which was unique for this process. So people from Cornell and Ithaca, professors, would come and talk to us about the math theories and the scientific theories and physics and things like that are being mentioned in the play that these characters understand so fundamentally, so that we as actors could portray that fundamental understanding. So that was really cool and unique for this process. So after that, we continued to have very deep discussions about the play almost every rehearsal, because these things that these characters are talking about are so inherent to them that they needed to be very clear to us. And it was a very collaborative experience. Greg Bostwick, the director, is very open to a sharing of ideas and a collaborative environment. It's been a very smooth rehearsal process. I'm very excited to open the show because it's been going very well.
And how large is the cast?
Pretty small. There are only 4 girls, and then I think, oh gosh, maybe I can't count them all. But there's not less than 20 of us altogether, including covers. So it's a pretty small, intimate cast, which has been great because we have these very deep conversations about the play, and it's a very intimate and a good environment.
And what about the scenery? How has the crew conjured up the 19th century and the current period?
What's really interesting about this play is that because it takes place in the house of an aristocratic family, it hasn't changed much from the 1800s to the 1990s, because they're kind of restoring it and keeping it in the family. So the set doesn't change at all and throughout the entire show. So you have props and things that exist in both time periods as the play is going on, which is very interesting. But the set remains the same because it's the same house and the same room. Which is really cool because you kind of have someone will be using a mug in one scene and leave it on the table, and then the next scene you'll be in the 1800s, but there's a mug sitting on the table, but it's all still a part of the same show. So it's really cool thinking about the space being the same and then the time being the only thing that's different during the show.
And do you think that's part of what Tom Stoppard was trying to do?
Absolutely. I think he's definitely playing with that. There's a turtle in both time periods, and it's technically a different turtle. Like in the 1800s, they name him Plautus, but in the 1990s, they name him Lightning. But he exists throughout the play, so you kind of have things passing through time periods. And I don't want to like ruin the little moments, but there are things where you're like, oh man, like that's happening in both things at once, and it's really cool. And I think Tom Stoppard is an absolute genius for that because he's playing with space and time in a really cool way.
Great. Well, could you just say when the performances are going to be and if the audience would like to hear more information?
Yeah, so you can buy tickets at ithaca.ticketforce.com. And that's where you can buy tickets. We preview tomorrow, April 26th, and we have shows Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And all the information is at ithaca.ticketforce.com.
Okay, well, Lea Sevola, thanks so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.